In 1920, Charles Ponzi defrauded investors of over $15 million in what we now know as a Ponzi scheme. So what's a Ponzi scheme? What's a pyramid scheme? And what is multi-level marketing? And how does it affect commerce? Let's get into it. All right, well, welcome back for another episode of Theory of Why. My name is Rob Johnson, and I am excited about today's topic. It's something I've talked about, I'm pretty sure, on every single podcast I've done in the past, and it has to do with multi-level marketing. And people mix up multi-level marketing and pyramid schemes and Ponzi schemes, and they're actually a little bit different. There's some nuance to it, and it's important to talk about the differences so that way you can recognize when you are being scammed. So before I dive into the different definitions, let's talk about Charles Ponzi for a minute. So Charles Ponzi was a pretty interesting individual. He actually immigrated from Italy, and he came over to the States in around 1903, and then he started having different business operations and different funds that he would create, and all of this kind of culminated in 1920 when he set up this investment fund, which was actually funded by new people's money. So typically when you have an investment fund, you grab money from 10 of your closest friends and you say, hey, we're all going to put in $100,000 and we're going to invest in this product, this fund, this market, whatever it is. And then the returns from that investment are generated from the success of whatever it is you invested in. So if it's a company, the net profits of that company would then be returned to the investors, and that would be distributed accordingly. However, Charles Ponzi did not do this. He paid off people from new investor money. So he would tell people, hey, I have this fund. If you invest $100,000 in 45 days, it will return 50%. And that's a real...
Sign me up.
Yeah, you in, Johnny?
I'm in right off the bat, right? 200%.
Yeah. So if someone says, hey, you get 50% in 45 days, that is an unbelievable return on investment. And so people, being 1920, there's no Google, there's no research people can do. They're like, oh, wow, I'm in. So he ended up taking about $15 million worth of money, and which today with inflation is several $100 million. So he took in all of this money and he was paying returns to the people who got in first from the new people who were paying in to the fund. And he was caught relatively quickly. In short of a year, he was in prison, and he went to prison for 5 years. He got out. He created another fund, went back to prison, and then he ended up being extradited to Italy in the 30s. So this Ponzi scheme, and that's kind of the origin of the name, is this guy who set up a fake investment fund to swindle people's money. That continued on in the 30s, 40s, and one of the most popular cases is Bernie Madoff. He did a very similar thing. He had, not only investment firms, but charities, wealthy individuals, celebrities, people investing in this fund. And it was actually the exact same thing Charles Ponzi was running. And Bernie Madoff was eventually found out in 2008 in the middle of the kind of financial crisis that took place on Wall Street. All of that kind of came out in the wash. And he ended up losing roughly $65 billion with a B dollars of people's money, making it the largest financial fraud of all time. If you don't count Social Security. Am I right, Johnny?
Yeah. So question on that, right? That's a good one right there. So if you were an early investor in that, chances are you did pretty good, right? As long as you got in and got out, but you probably made payments back to you, right?
Yeah. Well, typically it would be just a really straight commission. So if you had, let's say you were, friend number 2 and you put in $1 million and you were promised 50%, then you would have, 50% of your money coming right back to you as soon as those new investors came in, because 50% would go to you, 50% would go to Bernie. And then, the larger the downline got, the more complicated the returns became.
Yeah. Unfortunately, those new guys probably said, hey, I'll take the 50 and here's 50, take the other 50 and reinvest it again and again. And then they got burned with everybody else.
Oh, I'm sure. Because there's no one, it's like when you're at the casino, you don't hit at the roulette table and then walk away. You're going to be like, oh, I'm lucky. I'm going to do it again.
Good point. Yeah.
Do you know how long Bernie Madoff was sentenced in prison? Take a guess.
Not long enough. 5 years?
150.
Ooh.
Got 150 years. He actually died in prison in 2021, but it was I believe the longest sentence handed down for securities fraud. And, obviously rightfully so. He took $65 billion of people's money. And this kind of gets us into the conversation of what is the difference between a Ponzi scheme, a pyramid scheme, and multi-level marketing. So let's start with the easier one, multi-level marketing. So if you've been on Facebook and you have friends from high school that reach out to you out of the blue, you are very familiar with what multi-level marketing is, right? They want you to come to a party. They want you to come, look at these products that they have. Typically, the earmarks of a multi-level marketing company are they're only available through distributors. You can't go to Walmart and buy them. They're not available at Meijer or Amazon. You have to go to a distributor to get them. So multi-level marketing examples would be like Amway, Mary Kay. Obviously, there's anything that is, I think Pampered Chef would be another one where you have to, go to these chef parties or, there might be Tupperware parties. Whatever it is, though, people are trying to get you to come to this party to purchase the product and to become a distributor, because the more distributors that manager has underneath their downline, the more profits they get from what you sell. So that's why people conflate multi-level marketing with pyramid schemes. And I think in some cases it's rightfully so, because the main revenue model is made off of how many people you can recruit in your downline. So much so that companies like Mary Kay and Amway, they have different levels that you can hit by sales and by the number of people who are under you. So you might be a gold or a diamond or a platinum or a double diamond or a crazy ruby or a blood diamond or whatever. And based on whatever status you are, that is how many or how much multiple you make on whatever your downline sells.
Yeah, and I did that for vacuum cleaner sales for about 2 months when I got out of the service back in the late 80s.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, I could make peanuts on each vacuum, right? But I could work my way up to, make $400 on a $1,000 vacuum back in 87. But I started with 125. But my boss kept on raking in more and more money as me and every other Army guy that he recruited when we first got out of the service, got us in the under his wing.
And the interesting thing about these pyramid schemes is the more people that you have recruiting, like your income can be, unlimited to a certain degree. And that's what entices people when they hear the marketing pitch is they say, hey, right now, if you come in and you invite in 3 of your friends and they start selling makeup and then those 3 friends invite 3 of their friends, well, now there's 12 people in the mix, and then it just keeps on growing. But it's not going to keep on growing because people are going to run out of money. They're going to get frustrated. They're not going to be able to sell. They're going to run out of old high school acquaintances to hit up on Facebook Messenger. It's just not going to be a long-term fruitful process because, and kind of the spoiler of the episode, the main reason it's not successful is because you don't believe in what you're selling. You're only doing it for the financial benefit.
Amen.
Because if people were that excited about the product, and if the product had that much viability, you wouldn't have to go to a private distributor to get it. There's no reason to keep a product that's valuable is the best kept secret in the country. So if the reason that you're going into something is purely financially motivated, and they take advantage of work-at-home moms and stay-at-home moms rather, and moms that want to just be at home, make passive part-time income. So they play into that mindset of, well, you can just still sell while you're at home, while you're with your kids. You don't have to do really anything other than just recruit more people and have an occasional weekend party. And what they're doing is they're getting you to buy product, because typically when you invest into a multi-level marketing company, you have to buy a certain threshold of product. So you're buying that from them, which increases their profit. And then typically you're sitting on this product until you can turn it around. And most people statistically don't turn that product around and never place another order because they never got through the first one.
Yeah. And unfortunately with that too, it's all the people that get invited to the party that are your friends, things like that, all feel obligated to buy something that's probably already overpriced. They could have got for half the cost somewhere else.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You go, it's a guilt trip.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You go to this party, whether it's, I've seen like online that people have like these lingerie parties or these Tupperware parties or, baking and chef parties. And you go there and it's your friend and you feel this obligation to actually, participate. And if you're the originator of that event, it's a very awkward position for you to put your friends in. So I always look kind of poorly on the people that put their friends in that type of situation because they can't see the bigger picture for what it is. It would be like if I had a speakeasy podcast party at my house and everyone that came had to buy a podcast package, and like how awkward people would feel if I did that. Like, hey, Johnny, I want you to come over, hear more about, it's almost like a timeshare pitch.
Awkward. Yeah.
Without you having to be there for 6 hours to get a 2-night hotel room for free. But all of those things are just, they play into our lowest human emotions, because at the end of the day, if you're a stay-at-home mom, the idea of making passive income, the idea of being able to, add more money to the budget every month is appealing. And when people put it in a context of it being easy and simple and passive, and they set this lifestyle of success, and, I saw one lady online, I think she was with Amway. I can't remember maybe not, but regardless, she was speaking at this conference and she was saying, she's like, imagine this, imagine in 2 years, you walk into your job and you quit because, this pyramid scheme that you were a part of, and she uses the word pyramid scheme, has allowed you to go full time, and you have this, Mercedes, and you get all these bonus checks, and she's setting up this lifestyle that less than 1% of the people in the company can attain because they were the early adopters and they were the ones that stuck with it and made those initial investments because they were at the top of the pyramid. But they sell to the bottom of the pyramid using this lifestyle and this model of success that 99% of the people that sign up, they're not gonna be able to attain. And that's what irritates me about it is just the manipulation. You're selling a false narrative to people and playing with their hopes. And that's what's always bothered me, whether it's a multi-level marketing company or it's a pyramid scheme. And there's some debate online about how to differentiate between these things. And I'll just kind of give you what I've put together over the years of reviewing this. Multi-level marketing is a company that has a product to sell, and the majority of their income, 51%, comes from the product sales. The other 49% comes from the downline sales. So you might have commission from people in your downline, or registration fees or sign-up fees, startup fees, whatever it is. But the majority of the income has to come from the product. A pyramid scheme is the opposite. That's where there's not really a product. The majority of the revenue comes in through the sign-up fees and recruiting new members. So is the company focused on recruiting, or is it focused on selling? And that's why it's difficult for a lot of people to delineate between the two, is because they can look very identical on the outside. And for my purposes and how I view both of them, they are very similar, and I look at them in the same light. It's hard to distinguish between the two, because I don't find any legitimacy in either.
So do you have an example of a pyramid scheme?
So a pyramid scheme would be, there's so many different looks at this, because let me go into a Ponzi scheme. And that's what we talked about to open the show, which is where there is no real investment that you can make, but whoever's originating the fund passes off the investment. They look at it as if, hey, here's this investment fund you can contribute to. Here's the expected ROI. But all of that's really a sham, and you're getting paid with new member money. So that's why the three of these things are so related, because there's pieces of each one in every definition, but they are, somewhat different. So a pyramid scheme, I would think, is if you have a organization, and I would say Amway is a good example of this, because they have been brought up through the SEC. And it was really interesting when I think it was the SEC made a ruling about them. And I believe they used a language that said their business model is triangular, but they wouldn't use the word pyramid, because it was so much of whoever is in first is making the most, and then the success and efficacy of the business depends on how many new people come in and sell the product. So that to me is a really good example of a pyramid scheme because it is much more focused on recruiting than selling. And the products turn over and change so much. There's no value or belief in what is being sold. It's just whatever the hot ticket is. And they're selling the lifestyle more than they're selling the product. So I'd say that's probably a good example of a pyramid scheme. And a multi-level marketing company that is not a pyramid scheme, I would say would be like Mary Kay. So Mary Kay obviously has products. They have a ton of different beauty products for men, women, whatever. And they do focus heavily on recruiting, but they also sell a lot of products. And I don't think that their hands are clean by any stretch of the imagination because there's been a ton of people that they've sold inventory to that they don't buy back. And to me, it's again, another company that's trying to sell this lifestyle of how successful you can be.
So that's a great example that you just gave, right? Because those two are very, very similar. Because if you're talking about Amway, they have a product that they're getting their people to sell, catalog products, food items, and things like that. Mary Kay, very similar, but classifying one or other, or one or the other as one, or which one they're going to be.
Yeah.
Classified under. So yeah.
And my suspicion is that there's not a ton of publicly released information on the data for Mary Kay. It's not like they open their books to everybody. The reason why Amway, I think, was exposed as the pyramid scheme is because they went under an SEC. They went under an SEC violation, and in that came all the testimony and just all of these additional details that came out that we haven't seen, for Mary Kay. So that to me is something that's just, it's this element of you're not going to know exactly what a company is until you see, right down to the bottom of it. And Mary Kay, I haven't seen down to the bottom of it, but you can bet that there is some very pyramid scheme like things happening. But I've always kind of classified those two companies a little bit differently just because of the data that's available, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's this idea that there's no easy money in business. Nothing happens overnight. You might see people that appear to have overnight success. We look at this with athletes a lot. One thing, the NBA Finals just wrapped up last night, and I was thinking about in the Western Conference Finals, the Lakers were playing the Nuggets, and there's this player, his name is Reeves, Austin Reeves, and Austin Reeves was an undrafted player, and he rose to success, had a really nice rookie season last year, had a really nice run in the playoffs, is a great role player this year. And he's looking at a $100 million contract in free agency this summer. And you look at that and you're like, wow, this guy had one great season. He's going to be an overnight sensation. And what you didn't see were the 15 years preceding that, where he, shot the ball 1,000 times every day, where he practiced, he learned, he grew, developed. So you see this, wow, this guy had one really nice run, and that's the reason for the success. But you missed the 15 years that preceded that went into that level of success. Stand-up comedy is the same thing. Bill Burr is in his 50s, I believe. And he had some major Netflix specials come out in the last 5 years. And we're like, wow, Bill Burr is just kind of an overnight, sensation. He's not. He's had a podcast since 2008, one of the original podcasters. He's been doing nightclubs and comedy shows for probably, 30 years plus at this point. So there's a grind to it that people don't see. They just want to point to the success of the last year and be like, wow, things really just blew up for you out of nowhere. It's not out of nowhere. There's a ton of there's a ton of work that goes into this process that people don't see. And when it comes to these types of businesses, people want to forget how things are actually grown and just placate to, oh, this is really simple. We have this product, you can recruit all of these people, and you're going to be a millionaire in a year. It doesn't work that way. I've been at this company for almost 5 years now, and it's not an overnight thing. It takes a ton of work, and effort and people and, highs and lows. And anyone that comes to me and says, hey, I got this great idea that's going to be, it's $1 million idea in 6 months, my red flag, immediately goes up, because things just don't work that way. It goes back to the adage, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Because if something sounds that wonderful and that sensational, odds are someone is leaving out some important details. It's not a pyramid scheme. CGC Water Treatment and Plumbing. So they are a company here in Livingston County. They are the area's only authorized Connecticut dealer. They offer plumbing service. They have licensed master plumbers, water softeners, whole house filtration systems. They are a tremendous company to work with. When I was thinking about sponsors for the show, I actually picked kind of what sponsors I wanted to make pitches to, and they were on my short list, mainly because the people that are involved inside of that organization are top notch. Every single person that I've met has the highest level of character and integrity. They treat people exceptionally well, and I've always enjoyed all of my interactions with them. So if you're looking for a water treatment company, or just to get some direction, get some water tested to see what you may need at your house and just get a consultation, they'll absolutely take care of you. I highly recommend them. Check out all of their information in the show notes for the podcast. I couldn't recommend a water treatment company as highly as I do CGC. Again, their people there are top notch, fantastic people. You need to check them out. All right, so as we transition here, I get really frustrated by companies like this, mainly because it seems like people are trying to take the easy way out. It seems like they're trying to cheat their way into being a business owner. And this is something that's probably more controversial. Something I don't like is when people that are in multi-level marketing companies or pyramid schemes that are disguised as multi-level marketing companies, they call themselves entrepreneurs, right? You're not an entrepreneur. You didn't preneur anything. You didn't start anything. You didn't create anything. You got into somebody else's business model, took their products, took their materials, and started selling them to your friends. That is not creating something new. But I see all the time people be like, oh, girl boss or CEO. It's like, that's not what you're doing. Like, you're lying to yourself and you're creating a false sense of importance. And you act as though you're the person that originated all of this, but you really didn't. And to me, that's a slap in the face to people who are actually going and creating something new and are working extremely hard every day and making something that hasn't existed before, or doing something meaningful in their community. It's just frustrating to me when I see that online, because there are people that I know that work demonstrably hard at what they do. And then you have this person who just tries to insert themselves into the market and say, oh yeah, I'm definitely an entrepreneur. Oh yeah, I'm definitely, a CEO because I use Herbalife and I now, sell that product on Facebook. It's like, that's not how things work. And it's always just bothered me because it's not the same thing and people pretend as though it is. And at the end of the day, I think if you were to boil down my core frustration, is it's because the people that are sucked into these companies are being taken advantage of as well. And I don't want to see that either. If you have the desire to be an entrepreneur and to start something and to be your own boss, you can certainly go and do that. And you don't need these multi-level marketing products to do it for you, because that's not going to result in anything meaningful in the long game. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, or if this gets turned into a short or whatever the marketing team decides to do, someone might be in the comments and say, oh, well, I know this person, they make 6 figures a year doing that. Great. They're the exception to the rule. There were people in the Bernie Madoff scheme that made millions of dollars at the top of the chain. I'm sure there were people in Charles Ponzi's framework that made a ton of money in the beginning. Those are the exceptions, not the rule. I'm looking at the whole picture here, not just one anecdotal example that you want to throw up and say, oh, hey, this person drives a pink Cadillac. Great for them. The other people just got their car repossessed. That's the factual difference in the two. So holding up one example as if that is the end all be all and that is what people can aspire to is not enough. It's not the same thing. And I don't like when people pretend that it is. So there's a proverb that's not really attributed to any one person in particular, but I thought it was important to talk about today. So this is kind of a educational proverb, and then we'll get into a biblical proverb as well today for me in the show. So this one, I'm sure everyone's heard it. It's a fool and his money are soon parted. And basically what that means is when you have someone who has very poor financial discipline and they come into a lot of money or they get into a business venture for the wrong reasons, all of those things are going to naturally separate because they aren't careful with their money. This is why 80% of lottery winners go broke. It's because if you have poor financial habits, when you don't have a lot of money, those poor financial habits aren't going to get better with more money. It's the same thing that I tell people about behavior. And when people say, oh, this guy made a bunch of money and that turned him into a bad person, it's like, no, he was a bad person when he was broke as well. You just didn't know about it because that money amplified that personality. Money only amplifies what's already there. So if you have poor financial habits and you stumble into money or an inheritance or lottery winnings or whatever it is, that money is going to dissipate very quickly unless those habits change. And that's why foolish people and their money are separated, because there's no discipline there to maintain them or sustain them through, any meaningful type of time for them to hold on to that money. And in Proverbs 21:20, this was really interesting as well as I was researching this for the show. It says, the wise man saves for the future, but the foolish man spends whatever he gets. And I think if we all think for a few minutes, we know people in our lives who are like this, like whatever money they have, it's going out the door. This is how I was when I was younger. Any money that I made from my first job was getting spent. There was no savings. There was no thinking about the future. It was whatever was coming in was going out the door. And over time, as I learned more financial discipline, I learned about playing for the long game, saving for the long game, investing in things that are going to have a long-term payoff rather than a short-term payoff. And that's where a lot of this wisdom in the Proverbs is rooted in, is things that are going to be better in the long term. And a lot of people are short-term thinkers. They play for the short term. They play for tomorrow. They don't play for next year or the year after. And it really burns them, because after tomorrow, if you have and use everything that you have right now, there's going to be nothing in the future for you to build on. And I would argue that this is something I've done in business as well, is I've invested a ton into infrastructure and people, and I haven't cared as much about, building and maintaining a ton of cash on hand, because to me, the investment is in the people in the business. And over time, that has proved to be right, because that's what's helped keep the business moving, even through down economic times, is because of those investments that we made into people and infrastructure, rather than just writing as big of a dividend check as we can, because those things are just short-term strategies. It has nothing to do with the long-term growth of the business. And that's why I think a lot of businesses fail, is because they're so focused on that dollar and how that dollar is going to get moved from the business into their pocket. They don't think about putting that dollar somewhere else that can generate more dollars in the future. So think about that as you're growing your business. And please, if you're listening to this, and even if you're not an entrepreneur, you're not a business owner, maybe you're a college student, avoid multi-level marketing companies. Avoid opportunities that somebody else created that they're trying to push you into. And one question that I saw online as I was going through this was, someone asked if franchises, like fast food franchises or, plumbing franchises, if they're a part of multi-level marketing companies. And obviously they're not. Those are two different things. Like if you license a franchise, you're taking a brand that already existed and you're building that in a particular area. You're running it, you're staffing it, you're investing in it. I think I saw online to invest in a Jersey Mike's, the total all-in investment is $850,000. No one's doing that in a Mary Kay business. So franchises and multi-level marketing companies are very different things, very different investments, and a lot of different risk as well. So just be thinking about that as you keep taking your business to the next level. What does the future look like compared to tomorrow? And how are you planning for next year rather than just the next week? So thanks for watching Theory of Why. I'll catch you next week. Take care.